My name is Miguel Mata, first-generation American, retired military veteran, and now full-time college student. In my lifetime, I've come to meet people from all walks of life, from every corner of the country and most parts of the world, and what I can tell you is, everyone has a story. On this channel, I plan to share those stories with you and prove that despite the differences that make each of us who we are as individuals, fundamentally, we are all the same. I believe through the common thread of overcoming challenges, caring for our loved ones, and helping our communities, the rest of us will realize that our world is actually much brighter than some would make us think. And now, to shed more light, this way out. Hello, welcome back to another episode of This Way Out. Today, my guest is
William Matthis.
Will Matthis. Will comes to us with the story that you have to share. A lot of parts to it, but I really truly believe that you have the kind of story that a lot of people could learn from. You know, especially because this project, I created it to kind of speak to the human part of people, right? The personal side of people.
Yeah.
And your story is just so personal. And I thank you, for one, for sharing it with us. Two, for having the courage to share it with us, because you're going to really reveal a lot of, for lack of a better word, you're going to reveal kind of some moments of weakness.
Yes.
That you had, that you experienced. And, you know, when those moments happen for anyone, for us or anyone, sharing them, it's very difficult.
It can be, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So, Will, I thank you. Thanks for being on. Thanks for being on my show, and sharing what's to be a very personal story. I like to start off these things by telling us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from. You know, what's your background? Maybe a little bit about your parents. If you got any siblings, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I'm originally from a small town in Kentucky called Owensboro. It's now the fourth biggest city in Kentucky with a population of about 60,000 people. It's in the northwestern portion, right on the Ohio River, right across the border from Indiana. But that's where I was from. Had a fantastic upbringing. Never had any issues at all. Got along great with my parents. My siblings, of course, we fought like siblings do, but nothing really bad out of the ordinary as far as that goes. I guess graduated high school and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with life, and then still kind of told around there in that local area, working at my dad's business. He owned an automotive electric business, and I just kind of told around there for a little while. And then after a couple of years, I had a friend actually who came to me and he said, hey, I just signed up to join the Air Force. And he's like, if you don't mind, I'm on recruiter's assistance. And I hadn't talked to him in a while, so that explains he'd been gone for a while.
Right.
But I think he ended up going and doing POL.
Right.
And
which is a fuel.
Pretty much a fuel mechanic.
Yeah.
In
fuel
a
mechanic,
way,
right.
yeah. Yeah, he ended up going and doing that. And so he came to me and said, hey, I just need you to just even make an appearance. You don't even have to pretend like you're interested.
Right.
Just talk to my recruiter for me. And went in to talk to him and filled out some paperwork, and it just progressively kept building. Yeah. And then next thing you know, I'm leaving for MEPS, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm still not quite locked in. I can back out at any time.
Right.
And get back from MEPS, and everything's good there. And then my dad had this thing planned, a trip planned, just in case I went off and went anyway. And then 2 days from the time I got back from MEPS, my recruiter calls and says, you're leaving in 4 days to go to basic. And I was like, okay, so
you're like, I'm not even really fully committed to this thing.
There's probably no backing out of this now.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. So, no, I went off to basic. It was, honestly, it was a fantastic choice.
Right.
It was one of the best choices I've ever made in my life. I would recommend it to anybody. I learned a whole lot while I was in the military, and a lot of my background has helped kind of lead me down the path that I'm on now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I'm just to a point now where I couldn't be happier with the way life is now.
Right.
But of course, there were just so many bumps along the way.
When you were active duty,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Was it? I know that there's a point when the wheels just kind of came off.
Yeah.
Up to that point, how was your experience in the Air Force?
So I started off, went in as a crew chief, heavies crew chief, and our tech school was like 9 months long. It was a pretty long tech school, but we went from basic to Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
We were at Shepherd for about 8 months. Then we had about another month of follow-on at Little Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just go out from your bases from there. So I ended up getting orders to Pope. And a lot of people talk about No Hope Pope and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind it. It
Right.
wasn't that bad of a base. I had very good supervision when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I seemed to get along with everyone, I think, when I was there. And I worked in the ISO docks.
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing all the most heavy maintenance that you could possibly be doing on
Right.
the C-130.
Right.
Anything from removing wings to engines, that was commonplace.
Right.
Gear swings,
Mm-hmm.
the tail,
Right.
all that sort of thing.
ISODOC was the place where the in-depth inspections took place, and the more tasking maintenance operations took place, just like
Yeah.
your wing maintenance. And
So if you know what a
wing-
HSC is,
HSC,
the
that's
home
a
station check for the C-17
right home
tier,
station check. Yeah.
it's a whole lot even more in depth than that.
Right, and that was on C-130s, right?
C-130s.
That's a Vietnam era, Korean conflict era.
To be
aircraft.
perfectly honest, every single one of the C-130s we worked on flew in Vietnam.
Right.
They all did. They were all in Vietnam. They were all in the desert. They were all over the place, Afghanistan and everywhere else. So you can imagine there's going to be a whole lot of wear and tear.
Right,
They've
that's a
seen lot of
multi-purpose
life.
plane too, so it goes everywhere.
It does. You get shot up and
Yeah.
everything.
Well, that's pretty cool, dude. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds here.
Yep.
So you're at Pope.
Correct.
You're at Pope. What happens?
So I'm at Pope. Coming up at the end of my 4 years, I originally only enlisted for 4 years just to see what it was about and what I
Right.
liked. What I loved, absolutely, was thrilled about the supervision at Pope was the fact that they would allow me to go to school during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And just instead of reporting there to their duty station, just go over to the school. So they let me get my degree
Mm-hmm.
while I was in there on active duty, and I didn't even have to touch the GI Bill because it's all free when you're
Right.
active duty. So you
Right.
could just go and attend school. So I did that, which I would highly, I would say that would be a requirement if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
Every person in the military or Air Force or anywhere should get their degree while they're in.
Right,
Honestly.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
You're doing yourself a great disservice if you do not.
Right.
And but that's what I enjoyed about it. And then Pope came up on the BRAC list,
Right.
the base realignment and closures list, and it actually followed through. And they said, "Yeah, we're definitely closing this place down." So they were already cutting orders for guys to hit up and go to Little Rock.
Right.
And I was like, "Well, I don't want to go to Little Rock. I do want to stay in for sure."
Arkansas.
Yeah, I do want to stay in for sure. And I'm at the end of my enlistment. So I remember talking to one of my great, fantastic supervisors. His name is Gene Smith.
Uh-huh.
And I remember talking to him. And he was telling me, he's like, "You're at the end of your enlistment, right?" And I was like, "Yes." He's like, "Did you do anything about BOP?" And I was like,
That's
"What?"
base of preference.
Yeah, I was like, "What is BOP?" He said, "At the end of your enlistment, you can put in for base of preference to anywhere in the United States as long as your career field is there.
Mm-hmm.
You put like 2 or 3 maybe bases on there, and you're almost pretty sure shot to get it as long as your career field is there." So I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that at all." Now it does have to be within the continental United States. It can't be overseas, not necessarily. But So I just put in for Charleston first shot because I was like, it's not that further down the road. It's on the coast. I've heard a lot of good things about the local area. So I put in for here, and that's how I ended up here in Charleston. That's going to begin that chapter that I had discussed prior to agreeing to be on the show. Call it being just very stupid. Very, very, very
You made a reference
stupid.
to it. You made a movie reference.
Absolutely. The Pursuit of Happiness,
Right.
where he had spoke about the same thing. I mean, I was being dumb. So I ended up meeting this girl. I knew she was already had been with a friend of mine that was there, but I don't know why I even bothered after that. But I met her at a house party that I was coincidentally throwing. Someone had just brought her there and met her there, and we hit it off there. And then we're hanging out for I only had about another 4 or 5 months left in that local area before I was coming here. And I'd known I was coming here already. So, we had just hit it off, but she was doing everything she can to suck me in, pretty much. I mean, for lack of better words. I mean, she was doing everything she could to try to just be there all the time and pretend like she was there and that she cared. And
There's a reason you're saying pretend. So we'll just go. We'll just leave that there. We'll put a. What do they call that? We'll put a pin in that. We'll put a pin in that point. That point you just made.
Drop a pin right there. Yeah. So she did well. I mean, I was hooked because I'd had very low self-esteem up to that point anyway. So I didn't exactly have a lot being thrown at me anyway. So I was overlooking a whole lot. I'd had a captain that lived above me that was in the Army, and a lieutenant that lived beside me that was in the Army. And of course, I was good friends with them, very good friends. Shortly before I left, they all pulled me up to their apartment. The captain had the lieutenant pull me up there and say, listen, we are telling you right now, this lady is using you. We are telling you. We've seen this a million times. We are telling you, this is trouble. You do not need to proceed with this. She has 3 kids. You don't know anything about her. This is absolute trouble. Who moves in and then immediately starts right off the bat, with the things she was doing and making it appear like she was going overboard and making it appear that way and
appeared like she was going overboard. What does that mean?
Like being there all the time appeared like she cared, like it was just like smothering me with attention almost.
Okay, all right.
That sort of thing.
Right.
And they were like, I'm telling you, that's going to wear off. I'm telling you, this is a problem.
Yeah.
This is a huge problem. They were telling me that. And
based on what kind of other, did they have like hard evidence?
it was one of those situations that was so bad, apparently, that every single person around me knew it but me.
Okay.
So, it was it was so weird because everyone around me could see it. My own parents, when I was going from Hope to Charleston, I had planned on going up there on leave to visit them. And my own parents said, no, do not come up here. I'm telling you right now, this is trouble.
That girl's bad news.
It was really bad news.
Yeah.
They had met her. They said, no, this is really bad news. And everyone was telling me this.
Right.
And I just refused to listen.
Right.
Yeah, being dumb.
So you proceeded.
I proceeded.
Yeah.
And then moved her down here with me, and then...
Were y'all married yet?
No.
You hadn't married her yet? You hadn't married her yet?
No.
Okay.
We'll get to that part.
Okay.
Yeah. Geez, so moved me down here. So I moved down here to Charleston. I'm in these apartments. So now I'd already started seeing, I guess, interest or certain things in other guys that were around, and she was always making a point to run off and go hang out with neighbors and stuff like that, even when I wasn't around, and all that sort of thing, which, of course, that should have been, all this, I should have been paying attention to all of this, but I wasn't. So, after that...
there was something, was it, because I could see where, maybe she's just trying to be social,
Could be.
The demands of being in the military
Could be.
are tough on spouses, right? Especially if they're at home alone.
And a crew chief in AMC.
They want to be social, but there was something there was something more to it? Did you feel at the time that there was something more to it, or did you think it was just like innocent socializing?
There was something more to it, but then I got orders to deploy to
Right.
Turkey.
Right.
So I was like, wow, okay, so
And that wasn't very long after you arrived here.
no.
Right.
No, I'd been here maybe 3 months. I mean, I was in no shape or no way ready,
Yeah.
but I deployed anyway. And for whatever reason, 2 weeks before we deployed, we made the decision to get married.
Right.
Horrible, horrible decision.
Right.
But, you do it for the money and the deployment and get the most out of the
That's
deployment.
what was a big motivator. The financial.
Maybe, I don't know. I have no idea.
Man, I don't know how to
She
put
presented
this.
the idea of getting
She
married.
presented the idea to you.
And she also presented the idea of trying to adopt her daughter, and I was like, no.
Okay,
I
so
never did
okay.
do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is it's really now I can see where
It's
it's
getting
like
off the
strange.
rails.
I can see
Yeah.
where it's kind of strange, like people, like maybe like, being an objective person
Yeah.
and you're being in the middle of it. It does kind of say to me like, wow, how is this possible? But you were. Would you say that you were swooned by her? Like you
Yeah.
were completely
Absolutely.
in love with her.
I was sucked in. I mean,
You were infatuated with her.
that was the whole point. That was exactly the way this person operated. That's how they survived. That's how they made their living.
Okay.
I was a job prospect for her.
You think so?
That's exactly what
I mean,
it was.
that's
what it was.
that's your okay.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Okay, so she presents you with this idea of getting married, and you say, okay.
Yeah.
So you guys
I
get
just
get hitched a few. What was it? Weeks or months?
2 weeks.
2 weeks
I
before you
deployed
deploy.
at the courthouse.
Right. You
My
get
parents
married.
were in town, and they're like, "Oh, they're just, are you serious?"
Right, and this so I'd imagine this created like a big. I mean, it had already created a rift. This is
Well,
probably like.
For to give credit to my parents, they kind of said, "Well, listen, we're going to follow you, and we'll help you out if you need it, whatever." And they were just very accepting of it.
Right.
They just
Okay.
they didn't treat it real bad. They were very accepting of it, and then that's what makes it even worse when things fall apart, because then you've got that whole aspect. So
Okay. So what happens next? You get married, you deploy.
get married, then we moved to another apartment complex altogether. Before I deployed, 3 days before I deployed, as a matter of fact,
Mhm.
moved to another apartment complex because we weren't getting along with a lot of the element around there, but I think it was more that she wasn't getting along with a lot of the
Okay.
element around there.
Okay.
They had a neighbor that lived next door to us that was really wordy, and he would just tell me everything, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm telling you, I saw him like back in the back room and different things," and I was like, "Ugh." But she created this rift with them that now we need to move away from them. I don't want them filling your head with nonsense and all this other stuff. So moved to this other apartment complex, but then they end up moving and living right above us.
Really?
Right before I deployed too, for whatever reason. Whatever reason. I guess because I saw him and was telling him about the apartment complex. It was a pretty nice place. It was fairly new at that time. And it's out in Latson, but I guess he ended up moving over there and somehow got right above us.
Mm.
But so then I deploy. Well, man, he's telling me all types of everything. We ended up having a Marine recruiter that had lived across the way, and him and her were partying all the time. And he's like, yeah, I mean, they go to and from the pool. She goes over there in a bikini and then comes out fully clothed and showered and everything else. And it's like, it's pretty bad. But she was telling me that she had ended up taking the doorknob on the kids' bedrooms and reversing it so she could lock it at night so she can leave and run around with him, this Marine recruiter, at night.
How would they know that though?
Because they lived right above us and they were all partying together. Maybe even spy to an extent. Like they were just sitting back and just watching, but they were reporting most of it back to me. They were asking her, what are you doing with the kids? Where are the kids?
Right.
You're up here partying.
Right.
You've got 3 kids in the apartment. Where are they?
So she told them this
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah, and I
Okay.
came home and that doorknob was reversed.
And it was reversed.
Yeah,
Okay.
so she was sleeping with this guy, and then there was one of his friends that she ended up was sleeping with, and then there was a guy from the old apartment complex that she had met and known before
Right.
that had come over to one of the parties that she was at, and then him and her ended up disappearing down in my apartment. And they said they didn't see him leave till the next morning,
Right.
and this was all going on, in my own house, in my own bed, in my own apartment. And then she had ended up going back home to North Carolina. Of course, I'd known about all this, but I didn't. Of course, I'm in the dark when it comes to anything that could have happened there. I don't
Right.
have been anything. I know that she ended up staying at her sister's place, who had two other single male roommates. So I know that much. And so I don't know anything could have happened there. Then I get back from Turkey. Of course, Turkey was one of the worst deployments I've ever had, not because of Turkey. Turkey was a great base. Supervision was pretty good. You could go off base, you could walk around in the alley. It wasn't that bad. It was just knowing all this in my head
Right,
and
yeah.
not being able to do anything about it.
Right.
It's like being just torn apart from the inside,
Right.
just clawed at. And so I get back, and then of course a lot of it is just blatantly staring me in the face. Like this guy that had lived across the way, I'm only back a day and a half, and I get a knock on the door at the apartment, and I open the door, and he's kind of like looking around, trying to see like behind me. I'm like, what are you looking for? I'm like, can I help you? And it ended up being the neighbor that lived across. Oh, he's like, hey, is Christian around? I was like, yeah, she's in the back somewhere. And he's like, yeah, we're all getting ready to go to the bar upstairs. Would you and her like to come? Ask her if she wants to come with us. And I was like, why is this guy coming and asking me to ask her if she wants to come with him to the bar?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, So I was already starting to figure stuff out. And also being dumb and looking past it too. 2 weeks after I'm back, she comes to me and says, hey, we're pregnant. And I was like, we're pregnant? She's like, yeah, we're pregnant. I'm like, wow, that's fantastic. I'm having my own child. I've never had one before, but that was kind of on my list of things I wanted to do, is have my own child. So I was pretty happy about that. But then a few months goes by, and she ends up losing the baby while my parents happen to be in town for Thanksgiving. And they were telling her, you need to go to the emergency room. You need to get all that cleaned out or checked up or whatever they need to do. You need to go in and get that looked at. And she just refused and refused, because she knew that if any one of us accompanied her to the emergency room, that it was going to be found out exactly how far along she was. But it ended up biting her in the end anyway, because it all sat in there and got infected, and she had what they called a septic miscarriage. So we woke up one day and there was just blood everywhere in the bed. She had hemorrhaged everywhere and she was just shivering. So they rushed her to the Somerville Emergency Medical Center, who then had her medevaced over to the Trident Medical Center over there, because they had to do surgery right away. She had infection spreading all through her body.
Right.
And whenever they were doing the surgery, she had died twice in the operating room table. They were giving her back-to-back blood transfusions and everything else. The command here, over the AMU here, they were pretty good about it. They were giving me the time and just take care of yourself. And then they had the Joint Spouses Club from the base here at Charleston, and they came and they were there and made a presence, and everyone was helping. A lot of them went in and even donated blood, because they felt so bad about what had happened.
Right.
But the doctor came out and said, it was she got so lucky. So lucky. And that's what he was saying. You have no idea how close we were to losing her. If we lost her a third time, that would have been it.
Right.
And that's what he said. He said, you have no idea. And then he was telling me medical terms. And then he said, by everything we can see, the baby was conceived in late July, early August. And I was like, wait a minute right there. Could there be any way that you could be off? In any way? He said, well, we could be off usually about 1 week one way or 1 week the other, but we're not usually off by that much. And so then I just kind of sat back and I was like, my God, because I didn't get back from that deployment till the middle of October, so the math doesn't even
Right.
doesn't even remotely add up. So I was furious, and I was just like, what do I do now? She's in here practically in a coma, in here in a recovery room in the intensive care unit, and I'm like, how do you even approach something like that?
Right. Now the question is, after getting the information, what do you do now?
Yeah. So I had originally confronted her about it, and I'd had suspicions about that certain person anyway, the neighbor. I had certain suspicions about the neighbor anyway. And so she said, yeah, it was who you thought it was. But really what she meant to say was it was him, and she honestly had no idea. She couldn't tell you, I mean, who the father possibly could have been.
Right.
But that goes more into the more of the things that I had found out further down the road, of course. But so then I'm presented with that, and I don't know why, like an idiot, I chose to forgive that.
Yeah.
I chose to forgive that like an idiot. I have no idea why. That was the dumbest decision I've ever made in my life. And to look past that, because now she's reached the point now where she had a complete hysterectomy, completely not by her choosing, but that's because
That was the
what
result
required.
that was the result of the miscarriage.
The result of the miscarriage, absolutely.
Right. At the time that you'd forgiven her for all this, do you think it was because like you still had hope that it would just be you and her? You know what I mean? Like you would have this.
I had these dreams, maybe, I don't know, some sort of utopian fantasy dreams. I'm not even sure. I just I had these dreams for no reason. You know, it was just going to be like a family thing and everything.
Right. You wanted it to work. You wanted it to work.
I tried hard to make it work, but the AMU, of course, because I'd already, I was back 2 weeks and already had orders again to deploy to IUD. And AMU actually said, well, that's not going to happen. And they were actually helpful. So they jumped in. They said, what we would like to do is see if you would like to move up to the mock. And at the time, I didn't really know the difference, but they were saying it's a lot quieter. You'll be left alone a lot more over there. You won't be bothered with deployments and different things like that over there. So, and I was like, absolutely, I guess. I'll see what it's about. And got up to the mock and ended up loving every bit of the mock.
Right.
Every bit of it. I love the job. I love the people.
The mock is the Maintenance Operations Control Center.
Correct. Yeah.
Pretty much, it plays a big role in the maintenance operation.
Correct. Yeah, got up there and made a lot of good friends.
So you're in the mock.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, it was a step that the unit took to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of get your footing, regain your footing.
Right.
Maybe try to fix things with your spouse.
Calm down a lot.
Right.
Not go deploy a whole bunch.
Right. But get yourself back together, your home life back together.
Right.
And there was an opportunity to do that.
Right.
Unfortunately, that the same thing would kind of rear its ugly head.
It always tended to rear its ugly head.
And that was true because what happened?
Good friend of mine come over for barbecues a whole lot, but I had noticed in her phone, she was in her phone a lot, and I noticed she was texting my friend. I'm like, why are you texting him?
Right.
And I had no idea. And I didn't, of course, find out until everything hit the fan, and then call records and call logs and stuff were pulled, and the real scope of it.
You're talking about what hit the fan later.
Yeah, and the whole scope of it really just kind of exploded. I mean, there was, of course, I don't know what physically could have been going on, but it was talked about. I can assure you in the body of the text, and then the pictures were sent. So I've seen both of that.
Right.
And that's kind of
but the same
behavior
was still present.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And at that time, I don't know if and this was, of course, around the time I was starting to roll up out of the mock. I was coming at the end. For the first 3 years or so, it was startlingly quiet. I ended up moving back to the flight line. And I meet one of my supervisors, and he invites me over to his house for a party out in out in the sticks. It was out in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
and he had invited me over there, and I'd brought the wife with me, and it was weird to me because they met, and it's like you could see the way she looked at him and the way he looked at her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is going to be a problem right away. This is going to be a huge mistake.
And it was.
It was a massive mistake.
Yeah.
Massive mistake. Yeah. But had the party. I kept noticing they were trying to run off all throughout the night to get away from everybody. There was a bunch of people at this party out at this cabin, and a whole bunch of people there. And they had kept trying to make it a point to get away and just be away from everybody else.
Right.
And of course, you know, because after the fact, he kept inviting me to all these parties that he would throw. He'd throw them like every weekend.
Mm-hmm.
He was a single guy and was throwing them every weekend. Had a very nice cabin out there. And would throw them every weekend out there, and would always make it a point to invite us. And I was noticing it was almost uncomfortable to me because he wanted to spend so much time around us. He would always want to come over here, me go over there. I'm like, why is this guy showing so much attention? Because every time he comes over, he just talks to her. He doesn't even really talk to me at all.
Right.
I'm like, why? And it was just really strange to me anyway. But this is going to be another deep part of the what I call being stupid.
Okay.
Really, really stupid. So, needless to say, and this is nobody's fault but my own. Nobody's fault but my own. But my drinking had gone just out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Out of control. I could not control it. I mean, I was just doing that to cope, but I was like, it was getting out of hand. But every time I'd go to this party, they would be like, oh, you know, hey, drink. I'd get slammed and I'd pass out on the couch. Twice I got them in bed together.
Mm-hmm.
Twice. And, I'd never really... I've always kind of kicked myself a lot for never bringing that up to anybody's attention, but I kind of think, how would you even present this?
Yeah.
I mean, really. And so, like an idiot, I just said, we're not going over there. I'm not hanging out with him anymore. We're not doing that anymore. And I had another guy that I was deployed with, actually, when I was in Turkey. And God, it was going off the rails, and I knew it was going off the rails.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when everything started. That's when everything hit the fan. Around March or so of 2012 range, she had said, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the store. I'll be right back." She left, and she came back like the next morning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, "What are you doing? You didn't go to the store?" And she just swore that's what it was. So I was like, I'm not doing this with you anymore. We're not doing this. I'm completely done with this. I am out. And so I told her, just find somewhere to go. You need to stay here if you need to for the amount of time that you need to just to get your stuff together. Just find somewhere to go. And so Saturday goes by fine. We're talking civil. Sunday goes by fine. We're talking civil. Monday comes up. I roll into the AMU because I'd already gone back to the flight line at that point and already had orders to deploy again at that point. I mean, I was only back to the flight line for 2 months and already had orders to go to the deed.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when, so I go into work on Monday and go into roll call and swing shifts, and I see the commander and first sergeant standing off in the corner. I'm like, what are those guys doing? Is this some sort of promotion ceremony? Or what's going on here? And then I noticed we got all the way through roll call. It was a normal roll call, no problems. And I was like, they never got up, they never spoke, they never did anything else. So I was like, that's weird. So it come to the end, and they come up and pull me aside. They're like, hey, you need to come with us. And we go up there, and that's when they tell me that I was suspected of spousal, physical, and verbal abuse and all these other things. And I was under investigation and everything, and they had told me I was not allowed to come back to my home. I was in this home at the time, but they told me she was going to stay there. And oh, by the way, you need to leave your debit cards and credit cards. You can't cancel any of that. So I was like, so what do I do? They got me a dorm room, but I was only able to stay in the dorm room for about 2 weeks. And after that, they were like, well, I don't know. I mean, we can't give you the dorms are at full capacity. We don't have anywhere else to put you. And it was kind of like, don't know what to tell you, sort of situation. And
This is figured out.
And I'll be perfectly honest with you. That's exactly what they said.
Yeah.
They said, you still have to maintain that house out there. You can't fall behind on the house out there. You have to pay all the bills out here.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already living right at my means at that
Right.
point anyway. So
But
then,
this is all dropped on you in an instant.
in an instant,
Yeah.
just like that, the snap of a finger, like that.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'm having to figure this out. I had some money, I had some credit cards, different things, and I was paying on credit cards.
You know what? Before we get too carried away, I just want to ask you the question, just so it's on camera and we all see it. Did you hit your wife?
Did I hit my wife?
Yeah.
I never did. No.
Never once.
Never once. Never once.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we ended up, I ended up trying to figure something out, and I was staying at the hotels on base.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I had the no contact order to go to stay all the way away from anything involved and on this side of town completely.
Right.
Which, I mean, that's common. That's normal. That's what they do. And then so I ended up racking up all the debt I could rack up possible, eating on it,
Mm-hmm.
living in the dorms, and then not the dorms, but the hotels. And then I got to a point where I had nothing more to squeeze out of
Yeah.
anything. I could not squeeze another penny anywhere, and so I ended up just kind of driving around, just looking for different parking lots to live in. I did live in the dorm parking lots a couple times. It was kind of weird just because being on base, there's always a lot of movement at all hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of weird seeing someone sleeping in their car in the
Right.
dorm parking lots.
Right.
And you'll probably get approached pretty quickly about something like that. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was moving off base and sleeping in parking lots off base, but I mean, I didn't even have the ability to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any food. I didn't have anything.
How'd you manage that?
Well, I was going to churches. I would go to soup kitchens, and I was actually active duty, E5 at this point, and I was living in my car in a parking lot. I was homeless, eating at soup kitchens for
Right.
food, and so then I get the call. My sister calls me, says, "Hey, I think Mom and Dad, they're having some problems. Dad's having some issues." And I'm like, "Why?" She said, "I don't know. He's been doing a lot of weird things. He'll turn his phone off and leave the house at night and different things. And they'll find him at work real late at night, just wandering around at work." And it was his shop. It was his business. But that's fine. But she said, I'm gonna go by. We're gonna have a talk with him and see what he has to say. And because she is a clinical psychologist, a board and state certified clinical psychologist. She actually owns her own practice now. And so she was going by to have a talk with my dad, and showed up there, and she called me back and she said, "Will, I think Dad has had a stroke. He can't even form his words correctly. His face is droopy,
Right. Yeah.
on both sides. I mean, he can't figure out where he's at, and he just sounds like he's just way out there."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Well, call the ambulance right now. Get them there. Get him to the emergency room right now. I know he's going to fight about it because he wasn't a big doctor person. He didn't like doctors. He didn't like taking medication." So they fought him and got him there. And I just told her, I said, "Let me know what you figure out whenever you figure it out." And so then she called me about 4 hours later. And I was actually on base speaking to someone in one of the clinics on base at mental health already. And called me and said, "Well, you need to get home right now. It's a glioblastoma." And for those of you who don't know what that is, that's the exact same sort of cancer that John McCain passed away from.
Yeah.
It's completely not survivable. It's brain cancer that essentially roots into the center of your brain and then shoots out all these lobes and then puts pressure on your brain. And then,
Sorry. Yeah.
And then so he had that, and he only had a short time to go from there.
I'm sorry.
So now I've got all this. I'm homeless. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about anything.
And your dad's got terminal brain cancer.
My dad's got terminal brain cancer. And then about a month before, I had gone to see an attorney, of course, filed for divorce, I'd done all that. We filed a motion for relief because I told the attorney this is top priority. I don't care how much I have to pay you right now. This is top priority. And so I had my parents helping me out with some of that. And so we had filed a motion for relief. So we had eventually just made it, and then we had her removed from the home, and then it was just up to her to figure it out from there.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the chip we had, we were dating was that, you know, we could cancel it right now, right away, right now if you want us to, and then just have her thrown out right here on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys don't really want to play ball, and that's kind of stuff that was going on in the background.
Oh, okay.
More like towards her, because she wasn't wanting to give up, and she wasn't wanting to leave. So the judge basically just had to set an order that she had to get out. But shortly before I got in the home, I found a place, a roommate to stay with, so it started getting better there.
Mm-hmm.
This roommate was very understanding. This roommate had helped me, gave me food, would cook, and so I
Right.
had all my needs met, so that was fantastic. I was starting to be able to get everything back together. But for whatever reason, you know, I picked up the bottle again. And then I went insane. I went absolutely insane. It was around July 4th, and I went on like a 4-day bender, just completely just slammed. And I would shake in the morning and then just hit the bottle and everything else. I'd gone way overboard. And then after I'd recovered, I remember just getting so violently ill that I was hospitalized and ended up in the hospital. And so they told me in the hospital, you know, this is ridiculous. And that's, you know, of course, anyone would say that, absolutely, and it was. But I was telling them, I was like, the roof of my mouth is killing me. It hurts so bad. And they were like, well, we need to do an MRI. And then they did an MRI, and they said, okay, so we need to get you into surgery. There's a mass in there, and that needs to be addressed immediately. If this is serious, you could have like maybe a couple weeks to a month if it's cancer or something like that. And they were like, this is serious. And I said, this is where I was at this time. Horrendous. I said, you know what? I'm not even worried about it. Don't even bother. They said, sir, we strongly detest. We are serious. We are not playing. You will die if this is cancer. And I said, whatever. They said, well, just to let you know, it's really going to be painful. And I was like, all right.
Right.
And I just got up and walked out. I never did address it either. Never did. Not until much later.
Yeah. At this point, you didn't have any desire to go on because your life was kind of trash at that point.
Yeah.